We're not just talking about a stepdad, we're talking about the dad who stepped up. Old joke. I know everyone has made that joke at this point, but it's true. One Piece dads are sure interesting. They're either absent, dead, well-meaning but kind of weird, well-meaning but stupid, well-meaning and the best dad ever but cursed, not a dad canonically but kind of sucked at being a dad. My guy, you made some horrible decisions with Uta. The coolest dad in the world, the most horrible father in the history of fathers. I have shit with you personally, Judge. A bit violent but still a good dad, and well-meaning but absent. And yes, I am sticking by this. Get off my man's dick. If Dragon has 1,000 defenders, I am one of them. If Dragon has one defender, that's me. If Dragon has no defenders, I am dead. Oh, there's also Jamon. He's a pretty good dad. He struggled a bit, but he's a good dad. I was struggling to figure out if I should call Doffy a dad as well, but that would mean he actually tried to be fatherly towards the kids in his crew, and I remembered he's actually a terrible, horrible person. He's not a father, he's a cult leader. Get him out of here. But for this video, we are talking about the father of all fathers, Bartholomew Kuma. Or is it Bartholomew? I don't know how to say his name. Kuma. It's Kuma. We're talking about Kuma. He's not just a father, he is the father. A daddy, if you will. He had absolutely no need to take on any kind of fatherly roles or responsibilities since Bonnie isn't his child by blood. Because anyone can be a dad, but it takes a man to be a father. And in Kuma's case, it takes a wonderful, kind, soft, and compassionate man to be the One Piece dad of all time. Kuma falls into the One Piece man category of, this guy is actually incredibly sweet and incredibly gentle, yet those are the things that make him so powerful. And it's probably my favorite One Piece man category of all time. And that's exactly what this video is about. Because Kuma has a lot of themes around him, themes of kindness, devotion, faith, humanity, and, as almost all One Piece characters do, has the theme of freedom surrounding him like nothing else. But in a way that is so tragic, so heartbreaking, and is probably one of Oda's most devastating character arcs to date. But before we get into Big Daddy Kuma, it's sponsor time. Vegapunk upgraded Kuma into a unit of a machine, and Kuma managed to send anyone anywhere in the world. How? Because when making installations, Vegapunk also installed NordVPN. NordVPN is basically a secure tunnel between your device and the internet. It encrypts all your data, hides your IP address, and keeps your browsing private, even from your internet provider. So, whether you're scrolling outside or streaming abroad, your connection stays protected, which means my internet provider can't catch me Googling Zoro's big Jumbawumbas. My favorite aspect is the ability to go anywhere with NordVPN, meaning I can use any streaming service and change my country to get location-locked content. Go change your Netflix location to Australia so you can see all the One Piece movies we've got. NordVPN is even so generous that one account works on up to 10 devices, so there's no logging in and out per device just to keep your browsing secure. If you care about privacy, speed, and security, get NordVPN today. Plus, with a 30-day money-back guarantee, you can try NordVPN risk-free. Head over to NordVPN and be sure to use my code to get an exclusive deal today. Found both in the description and the pinned comments. Or you can type in nordvpn.com/melontea. And that's melontea with an E. A VPN is so worth it, so grab that deal now. And thank you so much NordVPN for sponsoring this video. Alright everybody, are we ready to put on our Sunday best, go to church, and pray? Because, dear Lord, am I ready to get on my knees for Kuma? Take that as you will. Kuma is probably one of Oda's magnum opus characters, and I am happy to call him that because this man has been built up ever since his introduction all the way back in chapter 233. In fact, Kuma's introduction is crazy when we look at it now. He was introduced in the Skypiea arc alongside Doflamingo, but he was a bit overshadowed because of Doffy's absolutely horrendous walk. No matter how many times I try to escape him, the horrible man just keeps coming back to get me. The reason this introduction is so crazy now is because these two are at total odds with each other by birth and by blood. Doflamingo is born of celestial dragon blood. His epithet is even Celestial Yasha, with a Yasha being a demonic yokai. And celestial in Japanese using the same kanji as the celestial dragon's kanji. This was supposed to be foreshadowing that he's a celestial dragon, and thank you Arta for that info. So Doffy is a celestial demon kicked from the heavens, those heavens being Mary Joie. Doffy wants nothing more than to rule, to cage, and to enslave. This became very clear in Dressrosa, where he both despised and envied the celestial dragons for kicking him out of Mary Joie, even though he brought his own father's head before them to show he wasn't loyal to his father's idiotic ideals. We also have Doffy's speech to Luffy at the end of Dressrosa. Luffy enraged due to realizing that Doffy just wants to cage everything he gets his hands on. And Doffy says back to him, "Then blame your blood. You were born to be human refuse and be helpless puppets. I'm not like you humans." That sure sounds like a celestial dragon.
My jeans are blue.
And why is it then such a crazy thing to have Kuma introduced alongside Doflamingo? Because hundreds of chapters later, we find out Kuma was essentially born into slavery. Kuma is of the Buccaneer race, a rare race in One Piece's world, with Buccaneer characteristics being size and strength. Kuma is naturally bigger and stronger due to his blood, and that makes him prime for being a slave. Oh, I feel gross just saying it. And this is why it was absolutely insane on Oda's part to introduce these two characters side by side. Kuma's blood made it so he was never given freedom. Doffy's blood made it so he was given total domination. Even though Doffy was kicked out of Mary Joie, he still has insane power just by being of celestial dragon blood. And these two would absolutely despise each other. Doffy would see Kuma as his property, and Kuma would see Doffy as a disgusting monster. Kuma is stronger than me. If I had the life he had, I'd want to choke Doffy's stupid pink feathered ass out on the spot. Die, you dumb bird! How are you still alive? But this is stuff we find out ages later, and I think we have to get a bit more into Kuma's other appearances before getting into his story. Just so you guys can see how Oda marinated and fine-cooked this beautiful man's horrible, horrible story. Kuma was always one of the more mysterious warlords of the sea, due to his very calm and quiet aura. He was very ominous though, his size alone made him terrifying. But it seemed apparent to anyone reading that Kuma didn't really fit in with the other warlords. He didn't feel like a pirate, at least not like the ones we've seen before. Perhaps he's closest to feeling like Mihawk, since these two are god-loving men. I actually don't know if Mihawk is a god-loving man. His little cross-dagger necklace is just really funny to me. But that was another thing. Kuma carried a Bible around at all times. Honestly, I thought this was just an aesthetic choice. Plenty of manga have used Christian or Catholic themes for aesthetic only. I really didn't think much of it outside of Kuma maybe just reciting Bible verses from time to time. And so, Kuma danced before the Lord with all his might. Kuma didn't actually recite any Bible verses, by the way. Faker. Yet, as it turns out, like it turns out with most characters in One Piece, Kuma's design is not just for aesthetic purposes only. The Bible he holds is actually a big tell for Kuma's person, and especially surrounds a whole theme of his character. But to get into that, we need to get into his backstory. We won't do that yet. Hold on, let's at least get to Thriller Bark first. Like many characters, Oda worked backwards with Kuma and revealed information about him little by little. This was information made to trick us or misdirect us, and it continues to follow One Piece's overall theme of misinformation. Or disinformation, I suppose. There is a difference between those two things, because disinformation means it's on purpose. Although I think only the world government and Big News Morgan are doing that. But anyhow, Thriller Bark is where Kuma rocks up for the second time in the story, and we not only see his powers for the first time, but he says his famous line, "If you were to take a trip, where would you want to go?" He says this to Perona, who actually answers him, and she says some dark, damp, horrible, haunted castle. Side note, it is absolutely hilarious to me that Kuma heard all of this and thought, seems like some shithole Mihawk lives in. He was right, Mihawk lives in a bit of a shithole. Kuma moves his hand, touches Perona, and Perona disappears in a second. He also teleports to move around at will, which was absolutely not terrifying at all when first meeting him. Perona is also the first person to call Kuma a tyrant, and this is the first time we hear Kuma being called a tyrant in the story. This alluded to the fact he may be a ruler somewhere, while also alluding to the fact that he's a cruel or oppressive ruler of some kind. Yet, this never sat right with me, because Kuma was a pirate, who was also a tyrant, who was also obedient to the world government? Pirate and tyrant? Sure, whatever, I suppose those two can go hand in hand. But obedient to the government? Something's not clocking here.
It's not clocking to you.
Perona was also the one to tell us Kuma is super obedient to the world government, and that is incredibly weird considering pirates do not give a damn about the world government. So Kuma was a special little guy from the get-go. After Luffy and the Straw Hats fight Maria, Kuma pops back in to demand Luffy's life and ruin everyone's day. I also have to point out, directly after Maria was defeated, Zoro said, "Relax, nothing this crazy is going to happen again." Zoro! Oh my god, Zoro! Kuma is right behind you! Zoro! Kuma's first interaction with the Straw Hats is probably one of the most terrifying scenes in One Piece. Not only is Luffy knocked out, but the others are already hurt from their fight with Maria. And Kuma is unbelievably strong. Kuma even says, "Killing a crew of weaklings is no fun at all, but orders are orders." And I think maybe Oda was going a little heavy with the ominous warlord Kuma energy here. But it's also possible Kuma was trying to scare the Straw Hats into giving up Luffy. Sanji kicks Kuma's neck and shatters the bones in his leg, telling us Kuma has a ridiculously hard body. And after Kuma sets off his Kuma bomb, which is super cool that he can just do that, Zoro fighting Kuma is what reveals Kuma to be a cyborg. Kuma tells us he's a pacifista. Ironic when he just set off a bomb. And he's the government's human weapon created by Dr. Vegapunk. So there it is, the first indication that Kuma has any connection with Vegapunk. Honestly, we should have known Vegapunk's inclusion would also include Kuma from this information alone. Everything about Kuma seems robotic and cold, scary and harsh, until Zoro offers his life in place of Luffy's. And Sanji then offers his life in place of both Zoro's and Luffy's. Zoro knocks Sanji out, refusing to let anyone on his crew die, and we actually see a glimpse of Kuma's humanity that we didn't know he had. Because he looks between Zoro and Sanji. He sees the desperation in this crew to keep each other alive. And he sighs, "If I lay a hand on Straw Hat Luffy after this, I'll be put to shame." To which Zoro responds, "Any man of honor would." Kuma is a pirate and apparently a tyrant, but he doesn't play dirty. And I remember when I first read this, I was shocked at how Kuma seems to be reasonable, because who was expecting that from what we have now just discovered is a tyrannical war government obeying machine. From here, Kuma makes a deal with Zoro to take on Luffy's pain. And for the first time ever, we see Kuma's pain bubble. And, well, we all know what happens after that. Just before Kuma vanishes from Thriller Bark, and just after we see Zoro leap into the pain bubble, we get one last insanely interesting bit of information about Kuma. Kuma stands on the edge of the Thriller Bark ship, stares out into the ocean, and says, "You have exceptional friends. He's your son after all, Dragon." Okay, so a warlord, a pirate, a tyrant, a government-obeying machine, and apparently knows Dragon personally. What the hell is Oda cooking? Kuma continued to become more fascinating when we get to Sabodi, as he has an uncanny ability of showing up during the most horrible, terrible, bad day of the Straw Hats' lives just to make it worse. And Kuma is definitely the reason for one of the most gut-wrenching scenes in One Piece, which is Kuma popping each and every Straw Hat into thin air. Dear God, wasn't this whole scene just one of the worst things to ever witness Luffy go through ever? I don't want to see Luffy like this ever again. Oh wait. However, there were already hints that what was happening here was more than it seems, because Kuma removed one of his pacifista robots while saying, "Don't interfere." Does anyone else want to know where the robot went, by the way? Did he have a little vacation spot he wanted to visit? Is he chilling at a resort right now? Through all this chaos, Rayleigh is fighting Kizaru and is desperate to get to Luffy to help him, but Kuma pops up beside him to whisper something in his ear. After Kuma says whatever he says, Rayleigh responds, "You expect me to believe you're the real Kuma." But Kuma says back, "That's up to you. I'm endangering my position by doing this." At the same time, Kuma also refuses to answer any questions Kizaru has for him, and Kuma gets right back to sending the Straw Hats up, and away. As Luffy sobs that he couldn't do anything, both Kuma and Rayleigh watch in silence, before Kuma reaches out towards Luffy and says, "We'll never see each other again. Farewell." Real quick addition, the other two characters introduced alongside Kuma here are Kizaru and Sentomaru, the two marines who are also incredibly involved through Egghead's arc and who also know Vegapunk personally. So Oda is once again making sure all these characters are connected to each other even within their introductions. And this is one of the reasons One Piece never feels messy no matter how many characters are added and no matter how many arcs there are, because Oda will always make sure to loop back around to the connections he's already established. Bonnie is also introduced in Sabodi, of course, but Bonnie never meets Kuma at this point. This is for reasons I'm sure a lot of you know, but we will get into later. Kuma was only becoming more and more confusing at this point because we just couldn't figure out if he was friend or foe. On a surface level, he seemed to be cruel, throwing Luffy's life and emotions into disarray by vanishing every single Straw Hat before him. Yet, Rayleigh eventually stilled once hearing what Kuma said to him, and Kuma didn't seem to move with any malice when saying farewell to Luffy. We also find all the Straw Hats had been sent to odd and seemingly random locations, none of them dead, and this only furthers our confusion. Marineford takes place after this, and it's even more confusing, because Ivankov, who we are introduced to as the legendary queer king and comrade of Dragon, is also revealed to be a close friend of Kuma's. But Kuma, at this point, seems totally emotionless and unrecognizable, distressing Iva greatly. Oda was really making sure to pepper bits and pieces about Kuma everywhere by the end of the pre-time skip era of One Piece. But all these pieces he was giving us just didn't really seem to fit together yet. It's only when we get through Marineford that we finally see Rayleigh again, and Rayleigh tells us what it was that Kuma whispered to him. "I'm a leader of the Revolutionary Army. I want to help the Straw Hats escape this place." Finally, we have figured out that Kuma is definitely a friend, and we now know why he has a personal connection with Dragon, because he is a leader of the Revolutionary Army. My God, does Kuma have a million layers to him. The only thing is, we don't know why Kuma saved the Straw Hat specifically, and we have no idea what Kuma's motivations are, especially after the whole Thriller Bark fiasco of trying to take Luffy's head. It all seems a bit counterintuitive to try to kill them, just to hurt them, then scare them, then save them, and then look after their ship? Shaki and the Rosy Life Riders, Duval mentioned by the way, had originally planned to take care of the Sunny, and they did, but Kuma also rocked up to protect the Sunny alongside them. Once the time skip happens, we get one of my favorite panels ever, of Frankie discovering Kuma guarding the Sunny. Kuma looks beaten, totally worn, parts of his flesh dissolved and Bible still in hand, and as Frankie stares at him, Kuma says, mission complete. Frankie explains the Sunny didn't have a scratch on it, and the Straw Hats tried to speculate why Kuma would go so far to help them over the 2 years they'd been apart. Frankie explains, due to Vegapunk turning him into a machine, that Kuma can't reveal what his true intentions are. But he ends on a line that now makes Egghead hit a lot harder. Always keep this in mind. Bartholomew Kuma is someone we are very much indebted to. But even if we see him again someday, he's now an emotionless human weapon. A lot of people were confused why Egghead wasn't Frankie's arc, although I never thought it would be. But Frankie was still involved at Egghead's core. Frankie was busting his ass to save Kuma, and it makes total sense as to why. Kuma not only saved all the Straw Hats 2 years ago, but Kuma also made sure to protect the Sunny, Frankie's own personal dream and treasure. Of course, with Frankie being around, Kuma was not going to die in Egghead. Frankie probably sees Kuma in very, very high regards. This is just cyborg to cyborg appreciation. And with all of the pre-time skip out of the way, we only get 1 or 2 more glimpses of Kuma before finally getting to Egghead. These glimpses are of Kuma being a slave to the Celestial Dragons. I also totally forgot Kuma was rented out to multiple Celestials. Like, the Celestials would literally be put on a waiting list to get Kuma as a slave. How horribly disgusting is that? It's no wonder Bonnie saw him and started crying. The revolutionaries are also aware of Kuma being a slave. Their attack on Mary Joie specifically orchestrated to get Kuma back. And we get 3 bits of information about Kuma from the Revs. Sabo says Kuma is kind-hearted. Morley says Kuma has been victimized by the world government his entire life. And Lindbergh says the world government made an example out of Kuma because he was a king of an allied nation. This is also the same time we find out Kuma was the king of a place called Sorbet Kingdom in the South Blue. So, Kuma's kind-hearted. He's been a victim all his life, and he was the king of an allied nation. Suddenly, that tyrant title is starting to very quickly unravel. God, I just love One Piece, and I love how hard Oda hits with the dangers of misinformation, rumors, and biased journalism that turns people into something they're not. I'm going through Kuma's story and appearances in chapter order right now because all of this truly shows how much Oda was building this man up to give us something amazing. And when we go back like this, when we recollect what we were told and what we were shown, it suddenly makes sense why Egghead had such a focus on Kuma. Doesn't it? Anything to do with Vegapunk, with a story of man and machine, with mind and heart, with death and soul, with science and humanity, was always destined to focus on Kuma, because these are Kuma's themes and more. Although I've left out one of the major themes, the theme that even connects him to the reason for why he carries this Bible everywhere, and that theme is faith. No duh, it's literally the title of the video. And this leads us into Kuma's backstory, into Bonnie and into Egghead, the arc that finally reveals Kuma for everything he is, and the arc that turns Kuma into one of Oda's magnum opus characters. This is gonna be rough. Kuma wasn't technically born into slavery, but he may as well have been. And this is due to his blood. His father was a buccaneer while his mother was a normal human, making Kuma half buccaneer, but his entire family was taken into slavery just after Kuma was born. Buccaneers were seen as valuable slaves due to their natural strength, and poor Kuma was only a child when being forced into slavery. There's also a point to mention that Kuma's father blamed his own blood for why his family were in the position they were in, and that is absolutely tragic in of itself, because obviously you cannot control who you're born as or the blood that runs in your veins, but it's hard not to turn the blame on yourself. Throughout their enslavement, Kuma's mother dies, and Kuma's father says something that definitely isn't heartbreaking and horrible for a child to hear. Your mother's dead, son. She's in heaven now, but I think she's better off that way. As Kuma cries, his father says to him, Kuma, you're strong. You can survive this. But poor Kuma says back, why? I'd rather be dead too. What is with Oda and making children that just want to die? I've had it with you, man. Can we just see a happy childhood for once? For once? Kuma's father explains that the warrior of liberation will appear to save them, also known as the sun god Nika. Kuma's father poses like Nika, recites Nika's rhythm, but as he sings the drums of liberation, he gets shot dead in front of his own son, silencing a slave who just wants to give his son a hope of liberation. One Piece isn't political, guys. I don't know where you could ever get that from. With Kuma's parents now dead, Kuma is sent to God Valley to become a target in a celestial dragon hunting competition. There's a whole lot I could say about this human hunting situation, but I need to limit this to Kuma, so we'll just take this as the horrifying, monstrous thing it is and leave it at that. It's here Kuma meets Guinea and Ivankov, two slaves who seek liberation and probably the two most important people in Kuma's life. Guinea was someone who became Kuma's own protector. While she wasn't exactly physically strong, she was very proud and defiant, and she would stand up for Kuma when Kuma wouldn't stand up for himself. Her and Kuma are basically the "excuse me, he asked for no pickles" type of dynamic. Ivankov, on the other hand, taught Kuma probably one of the most important lessons he could have learnt, and a lesson that is embedded all throughout One Piece. Miracles don't just happen. Miracles are made, because miracles only happen to those who never give up. While Iva didn't say it during the God Valley scene, this is a quote from Ivankov when we're first introduced to them back in Impel Down, and now we can see exactly where this mindset has come from. Ivankov was a slave in an impossible situation, yet their hope was still strong and their will was still powerful because they were doing everything they could to create a miracle. And their meeting with Kuma is almost like a miracle alone, because what they said to Kuma, no doubt, changed the course of his life. Well, I choose life. What about you? Isn't that just an incredible thing for Kuma to hear? A child who believed it would be better if he just died is now looking at another slave in his same situation, and they're yelling that they choose life. I'm sure Kuma saw liberation in Ivankov, and I'm double sure Kuma saw a hint of Nika's will as well. I do believe Kuma's own hope for liberation, his faith in Nika, came back stronger than ever thanks to Guinea and Iva, because he not only does the best he can to save anyone he's able to with Iva and Guinea's help, but he defies the celestial dragons to their face. Specifically, he defies Saint Saturn, that one bastard who followed Kuma and cursed his life like a damn plague. Kuma's speech to Saturn is a showing of how Kuma's faith has been restored, how his hope is stronger than ever, and how he now chooses life. Saturn says to Kuma, "Your only options are slavery and death. History itself chose them for you." And Kuma, bloodied and beaten, says back, "Are you important, mister? It doesn't make sense that you're born important, and there's no reason for someone to be born a slave. If I've got some kind of power, then I want to be like Nika and save as many of these unfortunate people as I possibly can." It was here, with this speech in front of Saturn, that Kuma became a saint, which is absolutely incredible writing on Oda's part, because Kuma is saying this to Saint Saturn. Saint Saturn. The celestial dragons have taken that saint title. They've turned it into something disgusting and hierarchical, a narcissistic belief that they are above everyone. Therefore, they are saints. But before a celestial dragon that superficially holds that title, that has bastardized the saint meaning beyond repair, a true saint is born, and that saint is Kuma, the poor buccaneer boy who just wants to save everyone he can, no matter the cost of his life and no matter the cost of his death. This is where Kuma's faith comes into play, and this is where the design of Kuma holding a Bible even makes sense. And Oda continues to hammer this in when we discover Kuma was originally born in a church. Basically, One Piece made Jesus Christ. Kuma is Jesus. He's literally Jesus. Oda is not subtle with it at all. Iva even calls Kuma's hands his hands of liberation. As Kuma escapes God Valley with Iva and Guinea, and as he lives out his early life in his family's church in Sorbet Kingdom with Guinea, he quite literally takes people's pain and brings it upon himself. He uses his pain bubbles, as we originally saw in Thriller Bark, to heal people and then take on their pain. Kuma is just shouldering the pain of humanity, and while this is only physical pain, there was someone else who took on humanity's pain. It's right there in Kuma's Bibble.
This is the Bibble.
These scenes of Kuma taking on everyone's pain has truly changed Thriller Bark, because Kuma made Zoro do the same thing. Originally, this was an act that seemed entirely too cruel, but now we know it's something Kuma, personally, has been doing ever since he was young. As Kuma says to Guinea, that mass of pain and suffering won't disappear until someone accepts it. Kuma was not just making a deal with Zoro to keep Luffy alive, but was giving Zoro the ability to take Luffy's pain from him. Had Zoro not stepped into Luffy's pain bubble, it would have made its way back to Luffy. This was not a cruel deal, but a shouldering of suffering to heal Luffy. If anything, Thriller Bark was an incredible act of mercy on Kuma's part, even if it was terrifying in the moment. Going back to Kuma's life, we can see Kuma's person and blood still affects him even while he's trying to live peacefully. And Kuma's dead father's regrets and traumas have seemed to rub off on him. Because Guinea loves Kuma a great deal. She wants to marry Kuma and live the rest of her life with him. She even claims she can make Kuma happy. But Kuma keeps rejecting her, not because he doesn't love her, but because he fears what will happen to her due to his own buccaneer blood. And this, to me, is an example of just how insidious the world government really is. Kuma may be free from slavery, he may not have physical chains on his wrists, but he's still restricted due to the system the world government forces on the world. Kuma loves Guinea more than anything. He wants to be with her. But because of how the world government sees Kuma and his buccaneer blood, he believes he can't be with her for her safety. He believes loving Guinea, being with Guinea, would be a selfish act that could harm her, all because Kuma was born with a certain blood running through his veins. A fate he can't even control. Guys, this is a silent form of pushing eugenics through an oppressive system, by the way. While Kuma and Guinea live within Sorbet Kingdom, the current ruler of this kingdom turns unjust and oppressive. Kuma becomes especially enraged when he hears the king is turning people into slaves, and he and Guinea get locked away for rebelling. Guinea tells Kuma if they want to save Sorbet Kingdom, then they have to take on the world government, because it's clear their current king is just trying to appeal to the celestial dragons. But this idea is so ridiculous it seems like a lost hope. Until, like another miracle, the freedom fighters appear with not just Ivankov leading them, but Dragon as well. And so, the Revolutionary Army is born. With the context behind why the revolutionaries were made and Kuma's own story, it makes perfect sense why he joined them. Kuma cannot stand any kind of oppressive regimes. He cannot stand slavery, because he was told as a child that his only choices were slavery or death due to his blood. Kuma's own existence as a free buccaneer automatically makes him a rebel. If Kuma just wants to live, he's a rebel, and he'd end up standing against the world government no matter what. Combine this with Kuma's self-sacrificing nature and desire to save people, and you have the perfect person for a revolutionary army leader. Because, remember, Kuma's own dream is to help and liberate people. All he wants is to be like Nika. This is why the revolutionary army severely, by the way. They're probably one of my favorite favorite groups in One Piece since Egghead. Kuma lives out his days liberating people and saving lives within the Revolutionary Army. But we face the horrifying ordeal of Ginny being captured by a celestial dragon and turned into a slave. A wife slave as well, which is just disgusting. I know there's debate around why the Revs didn't save Ginny, but it seems pretty clear to me it's because she was taken to the Holy Lands and the Revs were still somewhat new at this point. So the risk of losing more people would be greater than saving one person. Like, they didn't even have Sabo or Morley or Lindbergh yet. The three people who orchestrated the attack on the Holy Lands years later to save Kuma. Maybe they had Katasu by that point, I don't know, the Rev info is a little limited. The Revs were also pretty strictly sticking to helping whole islands and countries, and that alone was taking up their resources and strength. Honestly, I do see the Revolutionary Army saving Kuma from the Celestial Dragons years later as an act done not just to apologize to Ginny, but an act done for Ginny. Like I previously said, Ginny loved Kuma a lot and wanted nothing more than to protect him. So I'm sure this act of the Revs saving Kuma would have made her happy. Although I'm sure she would have also been happy to still be alive, but details. After Ginny gets kidnapped, 2 years pass, and we are introduced to, arguably, the current most important person in Kuma's life, Jewelry Bonnie. And Bonnie is where we see Kuma's softest sides, along with the heartbreaking extent of his self-sacrificing nature and the strength of his faith. As we know, and as I've kept saying, Kuma felt caged due to being a buccaneer. He didn't think he could marry Ginny. He didn't think he could have a family. But somehow, he's ended up with a daughter. Bonnie was Ginny's daughter and the child of some celestial dragon. Kuma even calls Bonnie Ginny's daughter. But it's quite clear through their lives, and as Kuma raises Bonnie, that Kuma becomes Bonnie's father. Even though Kuma's own life is shackled due to the celestial dragon system, and even though Bonnie appeared due to some horrible conditions, Kuma has been blessed with a daughter. I think this was the first idea that Bonnie was Kuma's own hope. And Bonnie was Kuma's own personification of liberation, which is totally ironic because Bonnie was surely born as a slave, just like Kuma. After all, Bonnie was tested and experimented on, treated like a guinea pig for Saturn's own research, which is what happened to Kuma also because of Saturn through Vegapunk now that I think about it. But Bonnie surviving, Bonnie making it to Kuma, Bonnie being able to live meant everything to Kuma, which is why when Bonnie got sick, Kuma dropped everything to find a cure, and even gave his own life at the cost of the cure. This didn't just mean Kuma's body or mind, this meant Kuma's general existence. At this point, Kuma had already shown us what he was willing to do for people. He'd even taken over Sorbet Kingdom after the previous king set the poor areas aflame to rid the country of peasants. This is why Kuma became known as a tyrant, even though he didn't impose any rule or force any law. He simply wanted to allow anyone the right to exist. Also, on a side note, I adore that Bonnie stares off into the flames of the kingdom and says, "I hope he's safe." Dad's always such a chicken. It's truly a sign of a good parent that you keep your scariest parts, your most violent parts, away from your child. Kuma's strength is such that he helped found the Revolutionary Army, that he could take over a whole kingdom with his hands alone. And yet, in Bonnie's eyes, she sees him as a chicken. Kuma made sure Bonnie only ever saw how much he loved her, only gave her his soft sides. And that is such a showing of just how much Kuma truly loves his daughter. So it's no wonder when Saturn told Kuma to give his life for Bonnie's health, he gave it in an instance. Kuma was forced to become a warlord, forced to become a world government lapdog, and was forced to obey his oppressors again for Bonnie's sake. Saturn didn't give Kuma the option to see Bonnie, or even message Bonnie, and threatened threatened Kuma with turning Bonnie into a slave if Kuma disobeyed him. This rattles Kuma greatly, and we can surely guess why. Kuma's biggest fear probably is Bonnie being forced into a life he used to have. All he wants is for his daughter to live a life of freedom, and Kuma was happy to throw away his own freedom for Bonnie. After all, Kuma had been throwing away his life and sacrificing himself for everyone ever since he was a child, which is why it's no surprise when Saturn says Kuma essentially has to die for Bonnie's life. Kuma sobs and responds with, "I was so worried that his demands would be impossible, and I wouldn't be able to save Bonnie despite being so close. Thank you. I will gladly accept any fate if it means curing Bonnie's disease." Vegapunk is part of this conversation, and he was enraged at Saturn's demands. And I think he does a good job at embodying the audience here, because I was enraged at Saturn's demands too. How could one just offer their life so easily? But this is something Kuma has been doing ever since he was a child. When he was a kid, he yelled at Saturn, "I want to be like Nika and save as many of these unfortunate people as I possibly can." At that moment, I said Kuma had become a saint, and I know this to be true because Vegapunk calls Kuma a true saint. Oda had framed this magnificently as well, because Vegapunk calls Kuma that, and then we cut to Mary Joie on the same page where we see Saint Saturn. Kuma even says he'll make a deal with the devil himself if it means saving Bonnie. And, oh, what are Saturn's powers again? How does Saturn appear again? Is that a fucking pentacle? Do we believe now that Oda is using Kuma to show a true saint is not a saint by name, but by actions? And that the celestial dragons have just bastardized the saint title to turn themselves into gods? Because he's not very subtle with it. The reason Kuma is such a magnificent character is because of how much he challenges the celestial dragons just by existing, and by showing just how much hope and faith can carry a person in an unfair world. So to us, Kuma giving up his life seems like the ultimate sacrifice. But to Kuma, this is nothing. This is the easiest choice of his life. He wants to be like Nika. He wants to liberate people. And his own daughter receiving liberation through his death isn't something he even has to think twice about. Because ever since Kuma opposed Saturn as a child, and ever since he decided he wanted to be like Nika, he had become a true saint. And when Kuma finally faces his so-called death, where Vegapunk needs to destroy Kuma's mind to turn him into a machine, the whole conversation is just heartbreaking. Kuma asks Vegapunk, "How much of a nuisance was I in the end?" And Vegapunk says, "Well, what is life but being a series of nuisances? Your death is a nuisance to every person who's ever known and loved you." Dear God, that is such a heavy thing to say. Your death is a nuisance to every person who's ever known and loved you. Not your life, but your death. One Piece is so peak. I'm crying on my microphone here. As Kuma's mind is destroyed, we get a beautiful page of Kuma's life. We see Kuma running from childhood to adulthood, all the people he met, all the strength he was given. And Kuma stumbles once before we see Bonnie, and he stands back up to keep running. All his life, Kuma had been running for the sake of others, for the sake of freedom. He's been running towards the horizon where Nika will eventually shine. And it's because of that faith he's been able to keep running. So why is it that Bonnie is such a sign of Kuma's faith? Because he has passed down his faith to Bonnie, and her liberation is hope for his own liberation. Kuma must truly believe in Nika, must truly believe in hope for the world and humanity, if he's teaching his daughter of Nika's being, if he's singing his songs to her, dancing to his rhythm with her and giving her a hope for her own life. This is also why it's such a big deal that Kuma compromised his position to save Luffy and the Straw Hats. Kuma was in a semi-fortunate position at the time during Sabaody. Bonnie had become a pirate and was no longer kept hostage by the world government. But what really made Kuma believe in Luffy was hearing how he punched a celestial dragon. Before that, Kuma only knew Luffy as Dragon's son, but his faith in Nika and in a better future has now been placed in Luffy, because punching the world's oppressors with no fear of repercussions is surely what a liberator would do. Kuma even tells Vegapunk, "I instilled into Bonnie the stories of a warrior who rides the rhythm of liberation and brings smiles to all. If there is a hero who will bring a great transformation to this sea, I think it must be him." Even when Kuma saves Luffy, this is still indirectly for Bonnie, because Kuma wants Bonnie to see the age of Nika. And this is what makes Bonnie being captured by Saturn so tragic. When she's held up and ordered to be executed and Bonnie sobs, "Maybe it'll be easier if I just die," because Kuma had instilled nothing but the will to live in Bonnie, had wanted nothing more than for Bonnie to love and enjoy her own life. Considering Kuma spent his own childhood thinking it would be better if he just died. Bonnie sobbing and believing she should die is definitely a direct parallel to Kuma's own youth, and watching your own child experience your same despair would be a nightmare for any parent, which is why it is so damn rewarding, so satisfying. When Kuma eventually appears in Egghead, hearing the cries of his daughter to punch Saturn right in his big, disgusting face. Kuma had spent all his life running. He thought he'd finally stopped running when being turned into a machine. But his love for his daughter has made him stand back up, even through death, and run straight to her. Because this is the power of love. Egghead made a point to tell us that, no matter how much you modify living beings, you can't fully control them. After all, this arc opens with Lilith saying, "Why isn't it possible to control the urges of living creatures?" This was already alluding to Kuma not being a total robot vegetable. And then there's also the addition of Kuma having Buccaneer blood. Vegapunk even thinking, it is not the physical strength of the Buccaneers that makes them remarkable. We don't know everything about Buccaneers and what they can do. Oda is leaving some One Piece history out here, but there is something I know for certain. Kuma saving Bonnie is supposed to be a miracle. Kuma still being able to move of his own will is supposed to be a miracle, because everything that's happening here is through the sheer force of love. Oda may as well be looking into the camera to tell us this, as Saturn asks Vegapunk if Kuma still being alive is his doing. And Vegapunk answers, "Well, I suppose it must look that way. I could call it the power of love if it makes you feel any better."
That's the power of love.
This is probably one of the funniest Oda is looking right at the audience moments ever. He is telling you straight up why Kuma is still alive. It's because of love. But this whole scene in Egghead, the ending of Egghead, is so beautiful because of how Bonnie finally can pay back Kuma for all the love he's given her. Kuma spent his entire life protecting Bonnie. In more ways than one, he gave himself up to keep Bonnie safe. He even appeared in Egghead through the most insane circumstances just to help her. And now Bonnie has been given more faith than ever in her life, in Nika, to live. So when Luffy finally appears before her in his Gear 5 form just after Kuma saved her, when she remembers the faith Kuma passed down to her, there was no better moments for Bonnie to unlock her own form of liberation, in the form of Gear 5 Bonnie. It must be stated that this didn't just happen. Bonnie didn't just turn into Nika. This is through the faith not only Luffy gave her, but Kuma gave her, and we must think about this. Luffy is only still alive because of Kuma. Luffy only managed to get to this point because of Kuma's faith in him all the way back in Sabaody. And now, the only reason Bonnie is alive is because of Ginny protecting her, because of Kuma raising her, saving her. Her powers even replicating that of Nika's own due to the stories Kuma told her. Then we finally get the page of Bonnie unlocking her own freedom, unlocking her Nika form. And what chokes me up the most about this page? The panel of Kuma, silent and still, his eyes open as he stares at Bonnie embodying Nika. We don't really know how much Kuma can think at this moment. We don't know how much of a machine vegetable he really is, but we can assume there is definitely still some thought behind those eyes. Imagine wanting your daughter to be free, instilling stories of joy and faith in her with the hopes that one day she can live that life, just to see her representing the idol of liberation, yelling out the words, "I'm the most free." And this is why it was so important for Kuma to never give up, for Kuma to keep running, for Kuma to believe in his faith as much as he should embody his faith. Because miracles don't just happen. Miracles are made. Miracles only happen to those who never give up. I love Kuma and I love his theme of faith because it embodies an important message that you can't just rely on faith. You also need to act. The whole ending of Egghead is directly due to Kuma's impact. Luffy being alive to unlock Gear 5. Bonnie having the will and belief to embody Nika. Even Vegapunk realizing how his research led him down a dark path and turned him into a man he'd never wanted to be. This is all a ripple effect from Kuma's existence. From Kuma wanting to be like Nika. From Kuma not just having faith, but knowing he needed the will to act on his faith. And that's something so ironic about Kuma. He doesn't believe he's a strong-willed man. He calls himself a weak-willed pacifist. But the reason he believes this is because he's been surrounded by strong-willed people all his life. From Ivankov to Ginny to Dragon. All he sees are people with a will stronger than his own. Yet their will and their belief has pushed Kuma to have his own will and belief, which has now been passed on to Bonnie. And this is the power of faith, of hope. It goes beyond any gods or any religions, and it always ends on what we will do for the people we love. Kuma is one of Oda's masterpieces because he embodies One Piece's theme of hope in such an incredible way. And Kuma's faith isn't hopeless due to Kuma refusing to let it be hopeless. And the fact Kuma is a pacifist in a chaotic world. And Oda has made a point to show Kuma is a very soft-hearted man who still acts within a revolution it's just a great message to have. Kuma is not in a revolution because he wants to be. He doesn't fight because he likes it. He doesn't crave violence or power or war. He just craves freedom. Kuma just wants to live. And even though he's a pacifist at heart, the only way he can live is by fighting for it. So when he talks about Nika, when he passes his faith of Nika to his own daughter, this in itself is revolutionary. How dare you have hope in a hopeless world? How dare you have faith in a system of fake gods and fake saints? But by God, Kuma will keep running. He will keep believing. Miracles only happen to those who never give up. He doesn't care if he's not in the world where Nika has finally liberated all, because he is pushing to make that world happen with or without him, just so long as the future is free. You cannot remove Kuma of his faith. You cannot stop Kuma from forcing miracles. And you cannot ever take the strength Kuma's love for his daughter has given him. Basically, everything Kuma was doing was for Bonnie. Kuma's near whole being was shaped by Bonnie. Even his famous phrase, "If you were to take a trip, where would you want to go?" was because he was finding places to travel with Bonnie. Even from afar, and even oceans apart, Kuma was always loving Bonnie. This is hope. This is faith. This is the power of love. Kuma is a glowing embodiment of every beautiful thing about One Piece. When Egghead was first coming out in the anime, it became a trend on social media for fathers to do the Nika dance with their kids. And with everything I've taught you about Kuma's story, doesn't that just make your heart weep? Nika's dance isn't just a dance. It's joy, it's love, it's liberation. Music is human. Dancing is freedom. We dance because we have so much energy and happiness stored up inside us, we just have to move. Kuma is liberating his daughter with a simple dance, showing how much he loves her. And now fathers in the real world are expressing their own love to their children through this exact same method. And isn't that something so powerful, so telling of Kuma's character? Kuma's own love for Bonnie has transcended off the page, has made it to the real-life fathers of the world, and has turned Kuma into an idol in his own way. Kuma has embodied Nika more than he ever could have hoped for. His faith has reached us, and more than anything, his love for Bonnie, for his own daughter, has liberated her to believe in a brighter future. All this is why Kuma is one of One Piece's best characters to date, and why I love Kuma. And with that, thanks for watching. I'm so sorry for how long this got. I always think my scripts will be shorter than they actually are, but Kuma is someone you just cannot skip any details on. I cannot tell you how many tears I shed writing this thing, but wow, I sure do love Kuma. So, what do you guys think? What are your favorite aspects of Kuma? What has Kuma done for you? Please let me know because I absolutely love hearing it. Unless you hate Kuma, then I don't want to hear it. Just a quick reminder that I do have a Patreon, and if you would like to support me there, I'd really appreciate it. However, I know not everyone can support me in that way, and watching and sharing these videos does more than you can imagine for me. Tips are also nice, I will not lie. Tips actually help me a lot, especially over this time, and any generosity will not be overlooked by me at all. I can promise you that. Tips will make you a true saint. My Patreon also includes how to get into my Discord if you'd like to join my little community. If there's anything you'd like to see me cover, One Piece or otherwise, please let me know, and I'll see you in whatever I make next. See ya!